tell me a little bit about yourselves and sort of how you came to be in the foster care system.
You can go first.
I'll go first. Yeah, so my name is Justin Black. I entered the foster care system at 9 years old. Grew up in Detroit pretty much my whole life until about 17 to 18 years old. And I entered the foster care system largely due to what I believe is mental health issues in my family going unresolved for generations and generations, where there were domestic violence in my family and substance abuse. And at 9 years old, my mom and my family was forced to put me in the foster care system. So that was basically how my journey in the system began, and spending 12 years in the system from there. So.
Yeah, and I entered foster care at 13, but before that, my biological mother died by suicide, and I actually just found out that my grandma also did, which is her mother. But when she died, I went and lived with my biological father, who was mentally, physically, and sexually abusive of myself for about 8 years. And then when I was taken away from his house, I went and lived with my aunt and uncle. So it was more of a kinship placement. But then I lived with them for about 5 years until she kicked me out my junior year of high school, and then I had to technically, well, I was in foster care this whole time, but I went and lived with the foster family, and so that was my first introduction to living with people that I didn't necessarily know my whole life, and then they actually ended up adopting me at 26.
What was it like being in foster care?
That's a hard question to answer. I mean, it's a roller coaster. It's highs, it's lows. But if I could say what almost every foster youth or youth who've experienced foster care has in common, we have a lot of questions about, biological family. Why didn't my parents want me? Why wasn't my mom there for me? Why wasn't my dad there for me? So you'll spend almost your whole life questioning your identity, what you're going through, because that foundational piece of parental figures a lot of times isn't there, especially if you are adopted or you are being fostered. And even if you are adopted, sometimes you have that question, why didn't the people who gave birth to me, why didn't they want me? Of course, some people have different situations where your parents might have passed away, but for the largest reason why people are in foster care is because of neglect. So in my opinion, you have that question and you're trying to fill that void in so many different ways, and unfortunately a lot of times it's unhealthy ways. But yeah.
And I would say for the both of us, even though we've had very negative experiences during the time we were in foster care, I would also say that foster care essentially saved us, because it got us away from those environments that were really detrimental to our health, to our well-being, and I know for a fact we wouldn't be who we are today without actually going into foster care, because we were both exposed to a different way of life, a different way of thinking. I was exposed to my foster family, who ended up being my adoptive family, and changing my entire paradigm and everything that I know and believe to be true. And also I became a Christian because of them. So, and I know that you built your faith also because of your foster family and different experiences. So I would definitely say it's something that saved the both of us.
What kind of people do you think should become foster parents? If people are thinking about it and they're sort of doing a self-evaluation, what sort of qualities would you think would be helpful to be a foster family or foster parent?
Well, first, I feel like everybody has a role in care. There are so many qualities that requires. There are so many qualities that go into being a foster parent, but every single person has a role in the system, whether they are a mentor, a tutor, an advocate, a coach. Everyone has a role in serving youth who've experienced foster care, people who've experienced trauma, but specifically those who have the abilities to be foster parents. I mean, first, it requires just people who can have a good support system for themselves, not for the youth, but for themselves. Maybe have a church behind them, a group of people, families, someone who can be behind them to support them, and not have the superhero approach where you're going to save a child, but really have a calling on your heart to do the work of helping 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of the 400,000 plus who are in care today. So really, it requires you to have a good heart and a heart for serving. And if you have that heart for serving, then you are qualified to be a foster parent. But you do need those people behind you and that community behind you. But it really just requires you to have a good heart and remember your why. And that why should ultimately be to serve.
And I would always mention consistency. That is the biggest quality for me. And even with my now adopted parents, for the both of us, I think that's had the biggest impact on us individually and even together as a couple, just watching my foster family and how consistent they are in everything that they do and they say. And I think everybody, all humans, need consistency in their life, and especially with foster youth not having that as a child and things constantly changing or chaos. And if you go into a home where there is that consistency in what they say and what they do, even if it comes down to punishment, there's just consistency in your word and your promises and all these other things. I think that was the biggest thing for me.
What would you say to someone who's considering fostering or adopting?
Wow, it's so many things I would say. I would just have so many conversations with them about our story and about what we've gone through. But if I could say one thing, I would say the power of autonomy is very important in that, you becoming a foster parent, it won't always turn out the way you want. The things that the seeds that you're planting in their life, it may blossom years, decades down the road. It is not a quick thing where you're scooping someone up and just saving them. It may take years and years, and it may take them going through so many different things and transitioning out of your house and becoming an adult. It may take them being like a 30-year-old saying, now I get it. I get what you were trying to say. I get what you were trying to teach me. But it's not something that happens quick. But know that if you are putting forth the effort, if you have a good heart and the good people around you helping you through that process, and you're putting them first, taking care of yourself also, I would say, but putting them first, then you should have the confidence that everything will be taken care of. And that requires a lot of faith and a lot of grace and a lot of mercy going into this situation. The same thing God gives us all the time. You have to take that same approach with fostering youth, because you're going to need a lot of grace and mercy and forgiveness. You'll need a lot for them, for yourself. So going with that mindset, filled with grace, filled with mercy and forgiveness, and know that it won't be an overnight thing. This is not a microwave process, but it will take years and decades sometimes for it to click and for them to become who they need to become.
Yeah, and I would really just go back to a lot of what you alluded to, but also just thinking about watching my parents and the way that they fostered and then adopted me, and I have a younger sister that they also fostered and adopted. And I would definitely say that power of community and making sure that you have that community in place before you begin to foster or adopt, because you need people that you can rely on. You need that community of people that you can go to and get advice from and learn from. But then also, I would say making sure, what my mom always says is make sure that you have those self-care practices in line before you bring another child in your home, because all that's going to do is just kind of exacerbate different things or different issues that may be happening in the household. So figuring out ways for yourself to make sure that you're taking time for yourself to either it's healing, or if it's figuring out where your triggers are, or even just finding time alone and carving out that time. You have to make sure that you have these healthy practices set up before you bring another human being into your home and try to fit them into the culture of that household.
100% agree.
Tell us about the book and about your t-shirts.
Yeah.
Yes. So, Redefining Normal, How Two Foster Kids Beat the Odds and Discover Healing, Happiness, and Love. It's incredible. First and foremost, it's a blessing from God that we've been able to produce this. We've been able to kind of create this. And like I said, it's a blessing from God. And really the book and the idea behind Redefining Normal, so many people think that it's pandemic related, and it could be for a lot of people. But Redefining Normal concept comes from your normal is the identity that has been shaped by your family, your community, and your society, and so many other things going on around you, telling you what your identity should be. And for us growing up in foster care, our identity wasn't always the healthiest. Our foundation was built on something that wasn't always healthy. Toxic environment, toxic ways of thinking, toxic ways of proving my manhood, toxic ways of her proving her womanhood. And that becomes our normal and our identity. So in this book, we use our lives as a way of saying this was normalized in our lives. This is how we internalized it and expressed it in an unhealthy way. But we had to go through the process of unlearning and relearning. And though our lives may not be exactly the blueprint, we want to give people tips and strategies so how we learn that process of unlearning and relearning to that normal that was unhealthy and toxic. And it may be different for everybody, but we give inspiration, we give you strategies and tips to unlearning and relearning and creating a life that is beneficial and sustainable for not only you, but so many generations down the line, because we need to build a foundation and a culture that is sustainable for our children and our children's children.
Yeah, and now we're able and incredibly fortunate to do this full time. So we're basically full-time entrepreneurs, recent graduates of college, and we're really just spreading the word on healing and building a life worth living, and exactly what we've done and what we encourage other people to do. So we do a lot of speaking engagements. We're doing book clubs. We've done probably 7 keynotes just this year. And then since we launched in November, we self-published and we sold over 6,000 copies and won 7 book awards. So it's been insane a journey, but it's absolutely amazing and we love it. And because of that, we were actually able to buy our house that you're in right now. So, all because of this book that I fully believe that God downloaded into us. We wrote it in about 2 months. So writing it together during the pandemic.
Yeah, but ultimately, what we want people to know about this movement is we want to continue the conversation, because every single person has a normal to redefine. You may not have gone through extreme trauma like us, but there's something maybe your mom or dad they passed down to you, and where you need to say that maybe not have been the most healthy. It's normal to us, and that's what we've grown accustomed to. But I want to make the next generation better than what I was given, and improve their lives in a way, in some area of their lives. So everybody needs to go through this process of redefining the normal. So that's what we're challenging each and every person to do. And that's why we want to continue this conversation of redefining normal. So we wear our t-shirts everywhere. We want to continue the conversation any way possible. We have our wristbands, and we just continue this conversation in all circles, challenging all people, foster care or not, in all circles of life. So